We will now apply the methodologies we used to create the wood material to the other two materials, gray laminate for the two side doors and dark metal for the mesh support structure. Let's start with the first one. Select one of the two doors and open the Material tab in the Property window. Click on New and rename the material to Gray Laminate. Select the Principled node and using the Ctrl+T shortcut, automatically connect the nodes needed to configure the material. Delete the Image Texture node. Open the File Explorer window, locate the three textures, Color, Glossiness and Normal, and drag and drop them into the shader editor between the Mapping node and the Principled node. Let's proceed right away to connect the respective output and input channels of the Vector and Color nodes. Immediately set the color space parameter of the Glossiness and Normal nodes to non-color. Insert the Normal map node between the Normal node and the Principled node. By observing the door panel model to check the result, we notice that the texture surface doesn't look correct and shows some irregularities. Let's switch the working mode to edit mode and select the entire geometry. There is no mapping present in the UV editor. In the perspective window, press the U key and choose Smart UV Project Unwrap. Let's return to object mode and check that the texture now displays a significantly more uniform surface. At this point, we only need a small degree of glossiness and reflection. Press Shift+A and type Invert. Select Invert Color and place the node in the connection between the Glossiness node and the corresponding channel of the Principled node. Looking closely at the material, we notice that the texture appears excessively grainy. To reduce this effect, simply change the X and Y scale values, setting them, for example, to 2. Comparing the material we've obtained with the original from the reference image, we notice that ours is darker. To lighten it, we can use several methods, including the Gamma node. By introducing this node and adjusting its value, we can gradually and controllably lighten the material. This method is particularly effective because it allows you to adjust the brightness intensity without altering the contrast too much. With the Brightness and Contrast node, by increasing the brightness and adjusting the contrast, you can achieve a similar effect, although the level of precision may be lower compared to the Gamma node. And with the Hue Saturation Value node, by increasing the value in the Value section, you can boost the overall brightness of the material, but this approach might also alter the saturation. Personally, I believe that the Gamma node is the ideal choice for precise control over brightness. Therefore, in the Shader Editor window, we press Shift+A and type Gamma. We select the corresponding option and place the node in the connection between the Color node and the Principled node. With values lower than 1, the material becomes lighter. Conversely, with values higher than 1, the material becomes darker. Let's set the Gamma value to 0.7. Now let's apply the gray laminated material to the right door and the front panel. First, we select both of these models and lastly the left door. We press Ctrl+L and from the menu that appears, we choose Link Materials. The material has been copied, but we still need to perform unwrapping, that is, mapping on these last two models as well. Select the right door and switch the working mode to Edit mode. Select all the geometry, press the U key, click on Smart UV Project and then on Unwrap. Now repeat the same operation for the front panel as well. Let's move on to creating the metallic material for the support structure of the sideboard. Select the model, open the Materials tab in the Properties window and click on New. Rename the material to Structure Metal. Select the Principled node and press Ctrl+T to bring up the nodes needed to build the material. Remove the Image Texture node and drag the 4 required textures, Color, Metalness, Roughness, and Normal into the shader editor. To make the connections easier, arrange the textures in the order just specified. This will help keep the editor organized and clearly show the paths of the connections. With the mouse cursor inside the shader editor window, press Ctrl+Spacebar to temporarily maximize the window. This makes it easier to see and edit the nodes. Select all 4 textures with a selection box and press the keys SX0 to align them to the left. This command standardizes the position of the textures, making the layout cleaner and more organized. You may have noticed that for this metallic material, we have a few small variations. We have a roughness node instead of glossiness, which allows us to avoid inverting the connection between the 2 nodes. We also have the metal texture, which helps make the metallic material even more realistic. Let's stay in the enlarged window of the shader editor and proceed to connect the respective output and input channels of the vector and color nodes. Set the color space parameter of the 3 nodes, metalness, roughness, and normal, to non-color. Insert the normal map node into its respective connection. Press the control bar and spacebar again to return to the viewport with the 4 windows. Change the working mode to edit mode. Make sure all the geometry is selected and look at the UV editor window where you can already see a UV mapping present. This arrangement comes from the original cube used as the base to model the support structure. Since this mapping did not automatically update during the modeling process, it is now necessary to apply a new arrangement that fits the current shape of the model. Therefore, in the 3D view, press the U key. From the menu that appears, choose the Smart UV Project option and click the Unwrap button. Let's return to object mode and observe how the metallic material is now well distributed on the media support. However, when comparing our model with the reference image, we notice that the metal we created is excessively bright, reflective, and the texture appears a bit too coarse. Let's see how to address these aspects. To better define the texture's pattern, let's change the X and Y values of the scale parameter in the mapping node, setting them to 3. In the shader editor, press Shift+A to add a color ramp node. We place it in the connection between the roughness node and the corresponding input channel of the principled node. Move the white slider to the left, to a position of 0.5. Press Shift+A and add a gamma node, which we will insert in the connection between the color texture and the base color channel of the principled node. Set the gamma value to 3. There's still something to fix. If we carefully examine the front profile of the 2 shoulders, we can see that the texture is applied vertically. However, to maintain a consistent and realistic appearance, it would be more appropriate to reorient it horizontally. In fact, metal profiles generally retain the same brushing direction throughout their length, so it's essential to adjust the direction of the textures to reflect this characteristic. Let's switch the working mode to edit mode and the selection mode to faces. First, carefully select the 3 distinct faces of each front and back profile of your object. Once these specific faces are highlighted, navigate to the UV editor window. Within the UV editor, ensure that you select all the vertices that correspond to the previously chosen faces. After confirming your selection, press the keys R followed by the number 90 to precisely rotate these selected vertices by an exact 90 degrees. This crucial step ensures that the texture is now oriented correctly and aligns perfectly with your model's surfaces. Let's reactivate the Limbo and Lights collections and set the camera view. Press Z and select the rendered option to preview the rendering. Finally, let's save the file once again using progressive saving. In these 3 parts of the lesson dedicated to materials, we've seen how they are assembled and how much their impact affects the realism of images, also discussing the reasons behind certain choices. In the next lesson, we will see the result of all the work we've done so far, the rendering.